My wife scolded me after I told her and his brother who lives with us that he had to cut expenses. My name's Stuart. I'm 37 years old, and I work as a supervisor at Thornberry Systems in Columbus, Ohio. That night, lying on my own couch with my clothes tossed beside me like yesterday's trash, I found myself replaying my wife's words over and over in my head. Think about how you treat my brother. So I did. I thought about how I'd been paying Marcus's phone bill for the last 8 months. How I bought him groceries every week without so much as a thank you. How he left dirty dishes piled in the sink for days, fully expecting me to clean them up. How he borrowed my tools and never returned them, or used my truck without asking and always brought it back with an empty gas tank. Marcus had been living with us for 1 year and 3 months. Not visiting, not staying temporarily, living. My spare bedroom had become his personal bachelor pad, complete with a gaming setup that hummed late into the night, his clothes strewn across the floor, and the smug attitude of someone who believed the world, and by extension I, owed him something. The fight that landed me on the couch had started innocently enough. After dinner, I sat down with Carmen and Marcus at the kitchen table, laid out our monthly budget, and explained that things were getting tight. My company had cut overtime hours, and Carmen's part-time paycheck from the clinic barely stretched far enough to cover the extra costs Marcus brought into the house. We need to figure out a plan, I said, locking eyes with Marcus. Either you start contributing to utilities and groceries, or we need to discuss other arrangements. Marcus actually laughed. Not nervously, not in disbelief. He laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. Other arrangements? This is family, Stuart. You don't charge family. Before I could respond, Carmen jumped in, her voice sharp and defensive. Stuart, that's completely unreasonable. Marcus is going through a rough patch. A rough patch. That's what she called it. But this rough patch had lasted over a year. Marcus had been looking for work since the day he moved in, but somehow nothing ever lined up. Jobs were too early in the morning, too far from the bus line, didn't pay enough, or weren't the type of work he thought he deserved. There was always an excuse, always a reason why responsibility couldn't possibly fall on his shoulders. Meanwhile, I watched our savings account shrink month after month. I watched Carmen defend behavior she never would have tolerated from me or from anyone else. And I watched my own home transform into a place where I felt less like a husband and homeowner and more like an unwelcome guest. That night, stretched out on the couch, staring at the ceiling while the bedroom I paid for was occupied by my freeloading brother-in-law, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage, though I had plenty of reasons to be angry. No, what I felt was something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. It was clarity that I had been so focused on keeping the peace, on being the understanding husband, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have my own boundaries respected. Carmen's words replayed in my head like a broken record. Think about how you treat my brother. The truth was, I had treated Marcus like family. I'd given him a roof over his head, food on his plate, and more patience than he ever deserved. And somehow, in Carmen's mind, that made me the villain in this story. The house was quiet except for the muffled sound of Marcus's television upstairs. My television, in my house, paid for with my money. I lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, and started making a plan. Not out of anger, not even out of spite, just out of the realization that I couldn't go on living like this. Carmen and I had been married for 6 years. 4 years ago, we bought this house together, a modest 3-bedroom on the east side of Columbus. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. Or at least it had been, before Marcus moved in and turned it into his own personal crash pad. He showed up in January of the previous year. Carmen's younger brother, 29 years old, unemployed, and fresh off a bad breakup. That's how she had described it. He'd been living with his girlfriend in Cleveland, but when things went south, suddenly he needed a place to stay. Just for a few weeks, Carmen had promised. Just until he gets back on his feet. And I agreed, because that's what you do for family. You help when people need it. My own brother Jacob had stayed with me years earlier when his marriage fell apart. But Jacob had been out in 6 weeks, had paid for groceries the entire time, and even left my place cleaner than he found it. Marcus was different. From the moment he moved in, it was like he believed he'd been invited to a permanent vacation. At first, I tried to give him grace. The first month, I told myself he was still adjusting. By the third month, I'd started dropping hints about job hunting. By the sixth, I was having direct conversations about timelines and expectations. Every time, Carmen had an excuse ready. The job market was tough. Marcus was dealing with depression. He just started applying for this really promising position. He needed time to figure out his next step. Meanwhile, my grocery bill doubled. The utility costs skyrocketed from someone being home all day with the heat cranked and every electronic device running. My truck developed new scratches and dings Marcus conveniently never noticed. Tools began disappearing from the garage as if they had grown legs. The breaking point conversation started about 3 months ago. Small ones at first. I remember suggesting to Carmen, gently, that maybe Marcus could pitch in a little toward the electric bill, just until he found steady work. Carmen always had an explanation ready. When I suggested Marcus could at least pitch in on the utility bills, she told me I was being petty, that he was family, and family didn't nickel and dime each other. When I hinted that maybe he could help around the house, she reminded me that he was going through a difficult time and needed space. It was the same conversation, over and over, with the same result. Marcus remained a permanent fixture in my home, and I remained the unreasonable one for daring to ask for basic respect. Last month, I decided to try a different approach. I sat Marcus down man to man. No Carmen, no mediator. I explained that I wasn't trying to kick him out, but if he was going to stay here, we needed ground rules, some contribution toward groceries, utilities, or, at the very least, a few responsibilities around the house. He nodded along, agreed completely, and for a brief moment, I thought I'd finally gotten through to him. But nothing changed. Not a single thing. 2 weeks ago, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Marcus had been ordering takeout on my credit card. When I confronted him, he brushed it off as a misunderstanding, like I'd accidentally given him permission to help himself to my wallet. When I brought it up to Carmen, hoping she'd finally see reason, she told me I was overreacting, that it had been an honest mistake. That was the moment the cracks I'd been ignoring became impossible to hide. I started noticing how Carmen's tone shifted whenever I mentioned her brother, how quickly she grew defensive, as if I were attacking her personally. I saw how she twisted my concerns into character flaws, painting me as selfish, unkind, even cruel, just for wanting Marcus to act like an adult. The guilt she laid on me was subtle, but relentless. And for too long, I let it work. The truth landed on me like a weight around 3 in the morning, as I lay there on the couch with nothing but a thin blanket and a throw pillow that reeked of Marcus's cologne. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about chores or groceries or even Marcus's freeloading. It was about loyalty. My wife had chosen her brother over me, and I had been too busy trying to fix things to see it. The evidence was everywhere once I forced myself to look. Carmen had thrown my clothes onto the couch like I was some unwelcome guest in my own home, all because I'd asked her brother, a grown man, to pay his way or find another arrangement. I replayed the past year and 3 months in my head. Every conversation where she dismissed me. Every time she made me feel selfish for wanting my space back. Every excuse she invented to shield Marcus from accountability. Every single moment where Marcus's comfort outweighed our marriage. The pattern was clear now. Carmen had made her choice long ago. She just never bothered to tell me. I sat up on that couch and looked around the living room. My furniture, my television, my house. Yet somehow I was the one sleeping in exile, treated like an intruder in the very place I worked so hard to provide. That's when the anger came. Not in a storm, not with slammed doors or shouted words, but slowly, steadily like a tide rolling in. It was a quiet kind of fury, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that reshapes everything. At 3:30 in the morning, I found myself standing in the kitchen, brewing coffee I didn't really need. I sat at the same table where, just hours earlier, I tried to have that reasonable conversation about our budget. The same table where Marcus had laughed in my face at the idea of contributing to his own living expenses, as if the notion itself was a joke. That's when it hit me with absolute clarity. I was done. I wasn't going to fight anymore. No more arguments about fairness. No more pleading for respect. No more begging Carmen to see that her husband's feelings mattered as much as her brother's comfort. The decision felt less like something I made in that moment, and more like something that had always been there, waiting for me to finally notice it. And with that realization, the anger drained out of me. I wasn't mad at Carmen anymore, not even frustrated with Marcus. I was simply finished. Finished with a situation that had no solution because I was the only one even trying to solve it. I drank my coffee in silence, let the calm settle into me, and then returned to the couch. But I didn't even bother trying to sleep. Instead, I started building a mental list. Step 1. Call my boss in the morning and take a personal day. Step 2. Start looking for an apartment. Something small. Something mine. A place where I could drink coffee at my own kitchen table without feeling like an intruder in my own life. By the time the sun rose, I hadn't slept a wink, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. When Carmen came downstairs, she was already dressed for work, moving through the kitchen like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't thrown her husband's clothes on the couch and sent him into exile the night before. She glanced at the machine and said flatly, "You left the coffee maker on all night." I didn't flinch. I made fresh coffee at 3:30. She froze just for a second, then looked at me properly. "Stuart, about last night, I've been thinking about what you said, about how I treat Marcus." Her tone softened, her face taking on that expression she used when she expected me to fold, to apologize. I knew she thought I was about to backtrack. "Good," she said finally, "because he's family, and family doesn't. I'm taking a personal day." I cut in, my voice steady. "We need to have a real conversation about this situation." Her expression hardened instantly, the softness evaporating. She set her mug down so hard coffee splashed across the counter. "Are you seriously threatening divorce because I defended my brother?" "I'm not threatening anything," I said, calm but firm. "I'm trying to understand why asking a grown man to contribute to his own living expenses makes me the villain in my own house." Her jaw tightened. "Because you knew he was going through a rough time when he moved in. You agreed to help him for a few weeks." "It's been over a year, Carmen," I said, locking eyes with her. "And he's not even looking for work anymore." Carmen turned away from me, grabbing paper towels to mop up the spilled coffee. "He's been applying to places," she said flatly. "The job market is terrible right now." I leaned forward. "When was the last time he actually went on an interview?" She didn't answer. "Okay," I pressed. "When was the last time he even filled out an application?" Silence. "Carmen, he ordered $200 worth of food on my credit card last month." When I confronted him, he shrugged and called it a mistake. "When I asked you about it, you defended him and told me I was overreacting." "It was a mistake," she said, her tone sharp. "No," I said, shaking my head. "A mistake is forgetting to turn off a light. A mistake isn't repeatedly using my truck without permission, leaving the tank empty every time. A mistake isn't borrowing $500 from your cousin Danny and never paying him back. How is any of that my fault for bringing it up?" Carmen finished wiping the counter and turned back to me, her expression hard and unyielding. It was the look I'd come to know too well, the one that told me she'd already chosen her stance and nothing I said would make a difference. "Marcus is going through the worst time of his life," she said, her voice low but firm. "His girlfriend left him. He lost his apartment. He's struggling with depression. And instead of supporting him like family should, you're nitpicking him over groceries and utilities." I felt a laugh rise in my throat, bitter and humorless. "Nitpicking? Carmen, I'm not nickeling and diming anyone. I'm asking for basic respect from someone who's been freeloading off us for over a year. If he was truly struggling, I'd support him without hesitation. But this isn't struggle. This is convenience." Her arms folded tightly across her chest. "He is struggling. You just don't see it." "No," I said quietly, shaking my head. "What I see is him playing video games 12 hours a day, sleeping until noon, and ordering takeout on my dime. That's not depression. That's taking advantage." Her voice turned cold, cutting like ice. "So what are you saying? That we should just kick him out? Throw him onto the street like garbage?" "I'm saying we should treat him like the adult he is," I replied. "Set a timeline, set expectations, and stop pretending this is temporary. Because it's not anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "So you want me to choose? Between you and my brother." The words hit like a hammer, but I realized she was right. That's exactly what it had come down to. Not because I wanted it that way, but because she had forced it by refusing to draw any boundaries. I held her gaze. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I guess I do." For a long moment, she just stared at me, her face unreadable. Then, without another word, she grabbed her purse, slung it over her shoulder, and walked to the door. "I'm going to work," she said coldly. "When I get home tonight, I expect you to have figured out how to be more supportive of my family." The door slammed behind her with a sharp click. A moment later, I heard the familiar sound of her car pulling out of the driveway, leaving me alone in the silence of the kitchen. That silence didn't last long. Upstairs, Marcus's alarm went off, blaring through the ceiling. I listened as he hit snooze once, twice, 3 times. Not a single sign that he had anywhere important to be. I poured myself another cup of coffee and carried it to the dining table. Then I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping in the drawer, a collection of financial records, bank statements, utility bills, and credit card charges. I've been tracking the numbers in my head for months, but laying them out on paper made the truth impossible to ignore. Since Marcus had moved in, our monthly expenses had skyrocketed. Groceries up by half. Gasoline drained faster than I could fill the tank. The electric bill doubled. In total, our household costs had risen by 63%, all because of one man who refused to contribute anything. And seeing those numbers in black and white was like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, about priorities, and about a marriage that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Our grocery bill had climbed from a manageable $200 a month to over $400. But the real shock came when I started digging deeper into our joint account activity. 3 months ago, Carmen had withdrawn $800 in cash. At the time, when I'd asked about it, she told me it was for a coworker's baby shower gift and a few other odds and ends she couldn't quite remember. It seemed excessive, sure, but $800 wasn't going to break us, and I trusted her. So I let it go. 2 months ago, another $600 disappeared. That time, Carmen said it was for car repairs, and apparently, the shop wanted cash. I remember thinking it was strange, but she'd looked me right in the eye and said it with such certainty that I didn't push it. Then last month, another $500. This time her story was that she'd helped a friend in need, though she was vague on the details. Curiosity gnawed at me, so I pulled up our online banking and went back further. That's when I saw it, the pattern. Small withdrawals here and there, spread out just enough to avoid raising alarms. Always with neat little explanations that sounded plausible in the moment. Always just enough to slip under the radar of a serious conversation. And it stretched all the way back to when Marcus first moved in. My hands tightened on the edge of the desk as the truth sank in. Marcus wasn't just freeloading. Carmen had been funding him, taking money straight out of our joint account, our savings, our household budget, and handing it to her brother behind my back. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It wasn't just about her choosing him over me. It was about the deception, about the way she had looked me in the eye, lied, and let me believe we were scraping by while she funneled our money into his laziness. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed late at work, picking up extra shifts. The weeks I'd worn down the soles of my work boots, but put off buying new ones because we needed to watch our spending. The guilt I'd felt over buying myself a simple 6-pack of beer or a takeout meal on a long day, while she'd been handing over cash to Marcus as if he had a right to it. My chest felt tight. The betrayal was sharp, not loud or fiery, but heavy, like a weight pressing down. The phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. Carmen. I hesitated, then answered. "I've been thinking about this morning," she said, her voice measured, almost cautious. "I think we both said things we didn't mean." "Did we?" I asked, my tone flat. "Stuart, I know this situation isn't ideal," she continued, slipping back into that calm, rational voice she used when she wanted to smooth things over. "But Marcus really is struggling. And he's family. I need you to understand that." I cut her off. "How much money have you given him?" There was silence on the line. "Carmen," I said, more firmly now, "how much money have you taken from our joint account and given to Marcus?" "I don't know what you're talking about." I stared at the computer screen, my heart pounding. "Don't do that. Don't lie to me right now. I'm literally looking at our bank statements. Cash withdrawals. month after month, going back more than a year. Every time with some excuse that didn't quite add up. So I'll ask again, how much? More silence. The kind that feels heavier the longer it drags on. Jesus Christ, Carmen. I snapped, my voice rising despite myself. How much? When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Maybe 3,000. Over the whole time he's been here. I closed my eyes, the number hitting me like a punch in the gut. $3,000. On top of the double grocery bills. On top of the utilities, the gas, the constant drain of someone living rent-free under my roof. $3,000 of our money. Money she'd secretly siphon away to prop up her brother while telling me we needed to tighten our belts. Stuart, she said quickly. He needed help. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, fighting the urge to laugh bitterly. Help? No, this wasn't help. This was betrayal. That'd be why the time Carmen pulled into the driveway. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the front yard. The house looked the same as it always had, but to me, it felt foreign. I had spent the entire afternoon methodically reclaiming pieces of my life, and now the air carried a weight of finality I had never allowed myself to feel before. I heard the front door open and the familiar click of her heels on the tile. She stepped into the kitchen, her expression caught between surprise and suspicion as her eyes fell on the note I had left. She froze, staring at the coffee maker, then slowly picked up the card, her hands trembling ever so slightly. Stuart, she began, voice low, but I didn't let her finish. I'm done. Carmen, I said firmly, standing a few feet away from her, my arms crossed but calm. I've been trying for over a year to make this work. To make you see that asking Marcus to contribute, to take responsibility for his own life, is not me being petty. It's me expecting basic respect in my own home. And I've been ignored, lied to, undermined. Her lips parted, and for a moment I thought she might argue, but she just shook her head, her face paling. You can't be serious. You're leaving over this. Yes, I said. I am leaving because nothing else has changed. I'm leaving because I can't live in a home where my boundaries and my concerns mean nothing. I've found an apartment. I've signed the lease. I'm taking what's mine and starting over. Carmen's eyes flashed with anger, but it was tinged with fear, the kind that comes when you realize someone you've underestimated finally has the clarity to act. So what? You're just going to take everything and leave? You're abandoning this marriage? I'm not abandoning it, I replied. I'm choosing to preserve what's left of my dignity, my peace of mind. If you want to rebuild this marriage, it has to be honest. No more lies. No more favoritism. No more putting someone else's comfort above mine. Until that can happen, I have to live somewhere that feels like my home. She dropped her purse on the counter, a harsh metallic clatter that echoed in the kitchen. You're acting like I've done something unforgivable. I'm trying to protect my family. And in doing so, I said, you've been betraying your husband. That's not protecting anyone, Carmen. That's choosing someone else over me, over us. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Her eyes darted toward the door, toward the boxes stacked in my truck, toward the apartment keys on the counter. Everything I had been too careful to confront over the past year was finally visible, undeniable. Carmen's voice dropped to a whisper. You're really leaving then? Yes, I said, softer now but unwavering. I'm leaving to reclaim my life, my home, my peace. And I hope, someday, you'll understand why this couldn't continue the way it had. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked toward the living room, her footsteps slow, measured, as if every step weighed the gravity of what she had lost. I watched her go, then turned toward the door myself. The apartment, waiting quietly for me across town, wasn't just a place to live. It was a place to breathe again, to start fresh, and to finally feel at home in my own life. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me, and for the first time in over a year, the air felt clean, unburdened. The weight of resentment, frustration, and guilt I had carried was finally lifting. Marcus' television flickered through the windows, a faint background noise to a life I was leaving behind, but I didn't look back. With every step toward my truck, toward the life I had chosen, I felt an unfamiliar sense of calm settle into me. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving a situation that had no solution as long as I stayed. And for the first time in years, I felt a quiet, unwavering certainty. This was the right choice. Teresa wasn't stupid. She had probably overheard bits and pieces of the arguments over the past few months and could sense the tension in the house. "You know where to find me if you need anything," she said kindly. I nodded, appreciating her concern. "Thanks, Teresa. Take care of yourself." I drove straight to my new apartment and unloaded everything in one go. It didn't take long. Amazing how little you actually need when you strip life down to the essentials. By 6:30 p.m., I was sitting in my new kitchen with a beer and a sandwich, gazing out at the quiet courtyard. There was no television blaring from the upstairs bedroom, no dishes in a sink that weren't mine, no one borrowing my belongings or spending my money, and no one making me feel guilty for wanting basic respect. For the first time in over a year, I was home. My phone had been buzzing for the past hour with text from Carmen, but I turned it off without a second thought. I didn't need to hear it. Not yet. 3 days later, Carmen showed up at my door. I opened it to find her standing in the hallway, red-eyed and desperate. Her expression was raw, vulnerable, and pleading. "Stuart, please," she began. "We need to talk." "Right here is fine," I said calmly. "Can I come in?" "No," she said, her voice trembling as she took a shaky breath. "Marcus is gone." "Good for Marcus," I replied, keeping my tone measured. "You don't understand," she insisted. "He left yesterday, packed his things, and disappeared. No note, no explanation, just gone." I leaned against the doorframe, waiting for her to continue. "I can't afford the house payments without your income," she confessed, her voice cracking. "I called the mortgage company. They said I have 30 days to bring the account current, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings." "That's unfortunate, Carmen," I said evenly. "I know you messed up. I know you should have told me about the money, but we can work through it, right? We can fix this. How much money did you give him, Stuart?" "The real number," I pressed, my voice firm. Her voice broke as she admitted, "About $5,000 total." $5,000. I repeated, incredulous. "Not the $3,000 you told me on the phone." "Yes, $5,000 of our money," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "All given to him while you were tightening our budget and trying to make ends meet. And he took everything when he left. Everything I'd given him, plus he emptied my jewelry box, my grandmother's ring, the necklace you gave me for our anniversary. Everything." The irony hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had finally revealed his true nature, but only after Carmen had destroyed our marriage to protect him. She turned to me, pleading, "I'm sorry that happened to you, Stuart. Please, I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll make it up to you. Just come home." I looked at her, the woman I'd been married to for 6 years, and saw the raw desperation in her eyes. She wasn't asking me to understand her. She was asking me to fix a problem she had created by lying to me, choosing her brother over our marriage, and now expecting me to rescue her from the consequences of her own decisions. I felt a mix of anger, clarity, and resolve. This wasn't my burden to carry. This was the moment I realized that some mistakes, no matter how much someone regrets them, weren't mine to clean up. "No." "What do you mean no?" "I mean no, Carmen. I'm not coming back. I'm not fixing this," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You made your choice when you threw my clothes on the couch for asking your brother to act like a responsible adult. You made your choice when you lied to me about money. And Marcus made his choice when he stole from you and disappeared. I've already left that chaos behind." Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I love you," she whispered. "If you loved me, Carmen, you wouldn't have treated me like the problem for over a year," I said, my words calm but unyielding. She began sobbing harder. "Please don't do this. Please don't leave me," she pleaded. "I already left 3 days ago," I reminded her gently, though with the weight of finality. I could see the despair in her eyes, but I had no room for guilt. My life, my peace, had been on hold for too long. 6 months later, I ran into Carmen's cousin, Danny, at a hardware store in Reynoldsburg. "Hey, Stuart, how have you been?" he asked casually. "Good," I said. "Yeah, you can't complain," Danny continued. pausing as if debating whether to mention the obvious. I heard about you and Carmen. Yeah. I nodded, curious how much he knew. For what it's worth, he said, I never understood why she put up with Marcus garbage for so long. Guy was a professional mooch. You hear from him lately? Danny, he shook his head. Not since he disappeared. Carmen tried finding him, asking around, but it turns out he'd been borrowing money from half the family and never paying anyone back. Your wife said he even owed her sister $800 from 2 years ago. The picture was finally complete. Even months later, Marcus hadn't just been taking advantage of Carmen and me. He'd been systematically working his way through anyone willing to help him, one generous relative at a time. How's Carmen doing? I asked cautiously. Lost the house last month, Danny replied. She's renting a room from her friend, Julie, now, and working 2 jobs just to pay for it. He looked uncomfortable, then added, She asks about you sometimes, whether anyone's heard from you. I'm doing fine, I said simply. Got my own place. Picked up some freelance work on weekends. Life's good, and it really was. Better than it had been in years. I'd learned to cook for myself again. Made friends with neighbors. Took evening walks without the dread of what crisis might await me at home. Carmen had lost her house, her brother, and her marriage because she'd chosen to enable someone who didn't deserve it. Marcus had burned through everyone who tried to help him, leaving behind debt and broken trust. And me? I'd learned a truth that came at a steep price, but was worth every penny. Sometimes walking away is the only way to save yourself. Some lessons cost more than others, but they always teach exactly what you need to know. And in the end, they're always worth it.